I firmly believe that art isn't anything you ever complete. At some point, you just creatively abandon where you're at and move on to the next project. So I actually have a project right now that I'm calling Deep Place. And one of the experiments is that I really want to know one location. So out in the middle of the woods, I put a benchmark so that I know where to put the tripod. And 4 or 5 times a year, I return to that benchmark and I do a full 360-degree sweep of that area. It's off of the Hoosier River and the Coteau Creek down in southern Missouri. And my interest there is, what does nature look like over the course of time, and then put that in the context of a series of photographs. So I think anyone that is serious about imagery, whether it's watercolor or oil painting or photography or whatever it is constantly looking for ways to express themselves and constantly looking for ways to experiment with the world around them. And is there any type of person that makes a good photographer? Or, I mean, who can be a photographer? Anybody? Interesting. I had that conversation just the other night with a friend of mine, and I drew the conclusion that we're all photographers. We are visual creatures. We identify each other visually. One of the first things that we do as a culture when we meet is we look each other in the eye. We ascertain trust that way. We look at the world through our eyes, and then we react to it with the other senses. So my answer is, we're all photographers. Different calibers, sure. But I think back to one of my dreams, in a perfect world, we'd all be shooting images every day of the week, every hour of every day. Do you feel any more pressure with the ease of digital photography now? Before, it actually took some skill to be a photographer, but now, like you said, anybody can be a photographer. It still takes skill. You know, I think the analogy I would use is we all drive cars, but very few of us could do a race. It's just different skill levels, and back to it is a matter of your interest and your perseverance, because although you can push a button, it doesn't mean that you're in control of that camera. So once again, I recommend that if anyone really wants to get serious about photography, then take a few classes and really understand with the machinery. And it's simple machinery. It's composed of 3 pieces. It's composed of shutter, focusing mechanism, and film plane. You understand each one of those 3 pieces, you're in control of the camera. And very few people take that step. If you could talk a little bit about, I know you demonstrated the cameras a little bit, but 20, 30 years ago, I know you've said that photography really hasn't changed much except for the device. What has changed in those devices that has made your job easier, harder, the same? Materials are much better. 30 years ago, the film itself was nowhere near as responsive. The technology to process the film was a lot more unwieldy and a lot more unpredictable. The technology advances in film or digital or whatever they may be have made the machine a lot more reliable, a lot more predictable. It takes the second guesswork out of the machine and puts the guesswork back into the eye and the mind and the viewpoint of the photographer, which is where it belongs. I look forward to the next 20 years of enhancement in photography. We are seeing digital chips now that are extremely high resolution that would have been inconceivable years ago. We are seeing evidence of technology marriage, which is a composite of high resolution digital photography with what's a technique known as LIDAR, which is laser radar. And so now when I take that shot, I not only get the 2-dimensional flat image, but I get a 3-dimensional data archive along with it, so I can take that 2-dimensional image and map it to a 3-dimensional world. That's going to change everything yet again. So I think the real beauty of photography and the beauty of us as a race is that we are so inventive that there's no end to what we're going to invent, and I'm just really glad to be part of hanging onto the steering wheel as the thing's taking off down the highway kind of thing. It's been fun. It's been, actually, I feel that I entered photography at the right time because it was at the beginning of the explosion that is still occurring. It's just a fascinating field. Talking about the human race, on your website you have a particular link that goes to the Alien Project. Oh, yeah. Had a chance to take a look at that. What kind of thought process went through your mind? That's just a hoot. That started out as a joke about 10 years ago. A friend of mine gave me a blow-up alien, And so I put them in all these strange positions, contexts, in a bar, in a car, in a campground, and would take photographs of them. And then one day he deflated and he wouldn't inflate anymore. So I got on the web, and instead of buying one, I found a place that would sell me a case of them. So I am now the proud owner of 144 aliens. And they're always up to something. They're partying or they're dancing or they're singing. And it's silly. And so I think a certain amount of photography, a certain part of everybody's life should just simply be frivolous and humorous, just enjoying how silly we possibly can and laugh as often as you can too,
On the website, you also write about some of your, about enjoying the world and like I said earlier, stopping and looking around. What are some of the things that intrigue you the most about the world and people in general that you run into?
Well, the planet itself is fascinating to me. There's really no reason for it to exist. I mean, if you put your mind to it, it is once again, back to the algorithms that seem to control and dictate the fundamental components of the universe, which Einstein talked about, Richard Feynman talked about. Those are evident every day of the week in our natural world. When you look at the full moon, when you watch the wind patterns in the trees, when you watch the water as it runs through a creek, it's just fascinating the way the world is constructed. We don't appreciate it. We spend too much of our lives chasing trivial things that when we really ought to be paying attention to what makes us important. And what is that? I suppose one of the things I'd say is that we appreciate the world in which we are embedded as long as we take the time to do so. And so that's a long-winded answer to that question.
That's okay. You currently have an exhibit at the gallery at First Capital News. Can you tell us a little bit about that,
Sure.
when it is?
The exhibit opening is February 1st from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's basically an excuse to drop by and meet a whole number of other folks who are interested in photography. And then the show actually runs until May. Right now it's composed of about 25 pieces under glass and then another 40 pieces under different mats. You will find a variety, but all within that genre of found objects, landscapes, or abandoned farmhouses, things along those lines. That just seems to be what I'm good at shooting. I shoot people on occasion. You'll see a couple of photographs of people, but I'm really not a people photographer. There's plenty of those out there. I really enjoy shooting landscape, nature, and found objects once again.
Yeah, there's definitely many different fields of photography to get into. You say photography and people automatically think wedding photographer or something like that.
Certainly.
Yeah. So do you ever feel like you get pigeonholed in that type of thing?
I think actually I had a conversation with another friend of mine who's a photographer and has been for years, and the conclusion we drew that the person you're trying to please with your photography is yourself, and if others appreciate it, it's a better world. For you, at least. But I shoot for myself, and hopefully other people like my work as well.
That's good. That's good. Have you had a lot of different exhibits? Like I said, I checked out your website, and I saw that you had this one coming up in February. But have you had previous ones?
I used to exhibit once a year. Exhibiting is a challenge, and in many ways, it's emotionally exhausting. To prepare 15, 20, 30 prints for exhibit every year it's an emotional challenge. It's one that I kind of took a vacation from, but I'm back to it now. My intentions are to have a rolling exhibit at any given day somewhere on the planet. Back to my dreams, eh?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, dreams are a good thing, though. Yeah. You got to have them. Can you explain, maybe for those that don't know, what exactly a rolling exhibit is?
Rolling exhibit would be an exhibit composed of 10 to 15 pieces that move from one gallery to another. The galleries that I've been exhibiting here are all local. They're all in the major metropolitan area. My photography, however, is not limited to this area, so I'd really like to start developing some relationships with some galleries southern Missouri, where a lot of my work originates. And then ultimately, I intend to have some exhibits in Edinburgh, Scotland, Aberdeen, Scotland, and the Highlands, where I'm also shooting a lot of imagery. Just the images need to be represented in the area in which I've recorded them. At least that's what I'm deluding myself should occur. So that's part of my goal as well, is to have a rolling exhibit that kind of marches around different parts of Missouri, ultimately different parts of the planet.